Much, but not all of the nation is in its first week under the Environmental Protection Agency's new regulations for waters of the U.S., or WOTUS. A federal judge in North Dakota on August 27th prevented the EPA's implementation in 13 states, including Nebraska. Nebraska Extension Water and Ag Law Specialist Dave Aiken says the Clean Water Act regulates waste discharges into navigable waters. But it defines navigable waters as the waters of the United States and territorial seas. However, because Congress didn't define waters of the U.S., that task has been left up to the EPA and the courts. We talked with Dave earlier this week about the WOTUS regulations and started by asking why the proposed changes were so controversial.
EPA is trying to do what Congress didn't do when it wrote the Clean Water Act, is set the limits on what waters are regulated under these clean water programs, and particularly under the 404 program. And the 404 program has been very controversial, so any change to it, no matter what kind of change it is always going to create a lot of controversy.
Explain more on the 404 program and who would be required to get a permit for that.
Well, basically, if I'm a real estate developer and I've got some farmland and it's got some wet spots, I want to fill in the wet spots before I build my shopping center. Well, I've got to get the federal permit under the 404 program before I can do that. And if I'm going to fill 30 acres of wetlands, I have to buy 45 acres of wetlands someplace else to replace to compensate for the ones I filled. And that's the 404 program, and it's been a very controversial program from day one.
How would it affect farmers?
Well, it usually doesn't affect farmers unless they sell to a real estate developer or something. Then it could affect them. But if a farmer wanted to bring wetlands into crop production, then they would have to go through the same process, replace the wetland acres someplace else, and then they'd also be in trouble with Swamp Buster and be in trouble on their farm payments and their insurance.
So why are these WOTUS changes being made?
Well, the Supreme Court has said that the current waters of the U.S. definition that they've been using isn't correct. And so that EPA and the Corps need to change it, but they haven't told them how to change it. So they're kind of, hoping they got it right, but we won't know until the Supreme Court tells us.
Tell me more about the proposed changes to WOTUS. Go a little farther on what they actually are and what they mean.
The major change is including a new category called adjacent waters as being tributary waters to navigable streams. So if a water is considered to be adjacent to a navigable stream or a tributary to a navigable stream, then it's going to be regulated under the 404 program. Under the old 404 program, it was a case-by-case determination. Now EPA is saying that they are all in. EPA admits that this is at least a 3% increase in the amount of land that they're irrigating. Critics say, no, you got to put a couple of zeros behind that to get it right. So, but that's where a lot of the confusion is.
And this adjacent waters is very controversial, yes?
Very controversial. It used to be that EPA focused on wetlands, but now it's wetlands, ponds, ditches. It's very, very broad. It's not puddles. They've made that clear, but nonetheless, it is very broad and it is pretty confusing.
All right, what's happening now in the courts?
Well, there have been 3 lawsuits filed to stop EPA and the Corps of Engineers from implementing the new regulations. 2 of the judges punted, saying that they didn't have the authority to do this. The one judge in North Dakota says, I'll do it. And so he signed the order. And so in those 13 states involved in that lawsuit, including Nebraska, the old regulations will stay enforced. In the other states, for the time being, it's going to be the new regulations go into effect.
So which judge was right in that aspect?
Doesn't matter. This is headed to the Supreme Court, and it's just, I kind of wish they'd send it up there so we could have this over next month, but it's probably going to be a year or 2.
What is the outcome then?
Well, it's going to be a 5-4 decision because there are 4 judges that think that EPA knows what they're doing. There are 4 judges that think EPA never knows what they're doing. And then there's Justice Kennedy in the middle. And so if, EPA wrote this to try to get Justice Kennedy's vote because they knew it was going to be in the Supreme Court. So if they get his vote, then, they have got a shot.
Dave says if farmers have questions about wetlands on their property, they can contact their local NRCS office or their local Natural Resources District.